Hi, I'm Stephanie Jaworski of joybaking.com. Today we're going to make a chocolate almond torte, and this is what it looks like. This is a flourless chocolate cake. It's a single layer. I don't like to frost it. One, it doesn't need it, and two, I just think the cake is so beautiful on its own, I don't want to cover it up. And as you can see, the outside, the crust is nice and crisp, yet inside this is wonderfully soft and moist. So the first thing we need to do is preheat your oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 180 degrees Celsius, and you will need an 8-inch, which is 20 centimeter, springform pan. As you can see here, it comes in two pieces. And this, I use this because then it's much easier to remove the cake from the pan at the end. And then what we want to do, you can either spray your pan with one of those non-stick sprays, or I'm just going to butter it. And I just melted like maybe a tablespoon of butter, and then I'm using a pastry brush and butter the bottom and the sides. So, and then I like to line the bottom of the pan with a piece of parchment paper. That way it won't stick to the bottom of the pan. And if you want to remove that bottom plate, it's much easier if you have some parchment paper there. So, it's a chocolate cake. We need chocolate. So the first thing we're going to do is melt our chocolate. So I have a saucepan of simmering water, and you will need 6 ounces, which is 170 grams, of a semi-sweet chocolate, and put it in a heat-proof bowl. I actually prefer stainless steel. And, you know, your chocolate cake is only going to be as good as the chocolate you use. So try to use a good quality. And if you're using it like you're buying your chocolate bar, then coarsely chop it. I'm using these chocolate wafers, which are fine. And as they are. And then what we're going to do is also melt some butter with our chocolate. So you will need 6 ounces, again 170 grams of butter, which is 12 tablespoons. And I like to cut my butter into small chunks because it will melt faster, and it'll melt even faster if you have it at room temperature. So I'm just going to put that over my saucepan of simmering water, and I'm just going to melt everything. Okay, so that looks good. See, it's all melted, so I'm going to remove it from the heat. Now, I'm just going to feel that. It is like a little warm, so what I'm going to do is just let this sit a few minutes to cool down to room temperature, and then when we come back, we'll start our cake batter. So now we'll start our batter. If you have an electric stand mixer like I have here, use your paddle attachment, or you could use a hand mixer for this. And about a half hour before you start making this cake, you want to separate your eggs. So you'll need 4 large eggs. I like to separate them while they're still cold. It's much easier. The yolks don't tend to break. And then you want to put your yolks in one bowl, and then your whites in another, and then I just covered them with plastic wrap, and then you want to bring them to room temperature because room temperature eggs do beat up a lot better. And that takes, I would say a half hour. So what we're going to do is take our 4 large egg yolks, put that in there, along with a half a cup, which is 100 grams of granulated white sugar, and then we're just going to beat them together on medium-high speed until they're really thick, and they'll be quite pale in color. So that usually takes, depending on your mixer, 2 to 3 minutes. Okay, that looks good. When you're doing this, once or twice, you might want to stop your mixer and scrape the bottom of your bowl because those egg yolks do tend to stick at the bottom. So this is what you're looking for. Really nice and thick. As you can see, what a nice pale color. Beautiful. So now what we're going to do for flavoring is add 1 teaspoon, 4 grams of pure vanilla extract, along with our melted and cooled to room temperature chocolate mixture. go. And then I'm just going to mix that in. Simple enough. Stir there. Always sticks on the bottom of the bowl. So now, like I said, it's a chocolate almond torte and flourless. So what we're using is ground almonds. So you will need 1 cup, which is 100 grams of finely ground almonds. As you can see, this is what it looks like. Now you can buy it. A lot of grocery stores now sell finely ground almonds, either grocery stores or specialty food stores or health food stores. But you know what I did, because I didn't have any in the house and I didn't feel like going out, what I did is I just took 1 cup, 100 grams of just slivered blanched almonds, and I just put them in my food processor and ground them. Now what I did do, because when you do that, when you process the almonds in your food processor or blender, you got to be careful, because don't walk away, because if you grind them too much, you will get a paste. What I do is I just took 1 tablespoon, about 15 grams of my granulated white sugar, and added it while I'm grinding it, and that tends to prevent from getting into a paste. And then you'd have to start all over again, which we don't want to waste. So I'm going to add my ground almonds, along with just 1/4 teaspoon, 1 gram of salt. And I'm just going to beat that in. Okay, so simple enough. Move this out of the way here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put this in a wider bowl so you can see what I'm going to be doing here. Plus, I find if the bowl is wide as opposed to deep, it's easier, because we're going to now whip the egg whites, and it's easier to fold them in, I find, with a wide bowl. But you don't have to do that at home, because we have enough bowls to wash up. So now, in a separate bowl, you may have to wash yours if you don't have 2 bowls like I do. And we want a wire whisk for this, because we're going to whip up our egg whites. Now you could do this by hand with a wire whisk or with your hand mixer. So what you want is your large egg whites that are now at room temperature. And then I like to add a little bit, 1/4 teaspoon, 1 gram of cream of tartar. That helps to stabilize your whites and prevents them from drying out. Maybe if you know, so if you have a tendency to maybe overbeat them, that will help. You could, I mean, you don't absolutely need it. You can find it, the cream of tartar, on the spice aisle of your grocery store. Some people say they can't find it. If not, then just use 1/4 teaspoon of lemon juice. That will do the same thing. So what I'm going to do is beat these together on pretty low speed until we get it nice, like almost to soft peaks. And you will need, just have on hand, another 1/4 cup, 50 grams of granulated white sugar, because we will beat those in later. So low speed. Okay, so we're about at the soft peak. You can see they kind of peak a little, but then they immediately dissolve back into the rest of the whites. So at this point, we're going to start adding our sugar, like maybe a tablespoon at a time. Have your mixer on high speed, and then what we're going to do is continue to beat until the whites are nice and thick and glossy. Going to just scrape down, make sure all that sugar And you can always tell, besides the look of your whites should be nice and thick, shiny, you can always make sure that the sugar is fully dissolved into your meringue. Is if you take a bit and rub it between your fingers, it should feel nice and smooth. It's a little gritty, that means the sugar has not dissolved fully, so you want to beat it a little more. Okay, I think that looks good, so I'm going to try. Okay, yes, that, you can see, nice and thick, shiny. Okay, so now what we're going to do is add our whites into our chocolate batter. You don't want to do it all at once because then you'd be like mixing, mixing, mixing. And we don't want to deflate the whites. We just want to make sure they're all mixed in. And I find if you do it in stages, it's better. So I'm just going to take some and then just fold it in. Just going to up and turn it over and around. And add a little more. I kind of do 3, 4 stages, whatever, something like that. Beautiful batter. And the thing when this bakes, what's quite unique about this, because we have all these whites in here, is your batter is going to rise as it bakes. And you will also notice that the surface gets, like it forms a crust and gets quite cracked. And so that is normal, so don't panic. And then as it cools, it's going to deflate back down again. And that's kind of why you get that cracked surface. So if you're used to doing like the American type style of butter cakes, this is quite different. So I just want to make sure I get down to the bottom, get all that mixed in. Sticks on the bottom. Okay, that looks good. Now, if there's a few streaks of white in your batter, like, don't worry, that's no big deal. So then we have our pan, and I'm just going to pour that in. Now, the important thing when we're baking this cake is we don't want to overbake it. This is not, it's a little different. We don't want our, when we test it with our toothpick, we don't want our toothpick to come out clean. We want it to have some moist crumbs because this is a really soft and moist cake. We don't want it dry. So that's another thing to keep in mind. When you test it, the surface will be, the cake will rise up. There'll be a crust. And there'll be some cracks on that crust. And when you put a toothpick into the center, there will be moist crumbs. So I find in, as always, everybody's oven's a little different. I find in my oven it's around 45 minutes, so, 45 to 50 minutes. But don't check it earlier than that because we do not want this to be overbaked. So I would check it at least at the 40-minute. Just put your toothpick in there just to see how, you can gauge it. But that's what you're looking for. So somewhere between 45, 50 minutes. Okay, so our chocolate almond torte is now done. See, a nice crisp crust on the outside. There is a little cracking. So now what we're going to do, just put on a wire rack and we're going to let it cool. And as it cools, it's going to shrink down or deflate, I guess you could say. And then there will be more cracking, and that's the way it's supposed to be. And then when we come back, we will unmold our cake. Okay, so our chocolate almond torte has now cooled. If you need to take a flat edge, some kind of like a knife or a spatula, and just run it all around the inside, just in case it's sticking to the sides of your pan, and then just unclip and the top. As you can see, it's cracked. That is how it's supposed to be and kind of crater-like, so don't worry about it. pieces fall off, just kind of put them back on. Now, my personal preference is to store this. I actually like to store it overnight because that way I find it firms up. The flavors have time to mingle. If you want a really nice and soft and moist chocolate torte, store it at room temperature. My personal preference is to store it in the fridge because then it gets all nice and dense and fudgy. But we're going to cut into it now because we're doing a video. So I'm going to cut into it. So take a sharp knife, cut a piece, and then I like to wipe my knife in between cuts. Like so. And then hopefully it's going to be, there we go. Oh, see if you can see that. As you can see, got that nice crust on the outside, really nice and soft and moist in there. Now, how do you serve it? You can just serve it like this. You could dust the top with some ice, some powdered sugar, cocoa powder. And if you want an accompaniment to it, you could use fresh berries is very nice. You could have a fruit sauce like my personal favorite, raspberry or strawberry. And you know, you could do a creme anglaise or a custard sauce. And if you want a quick and easy way to have a creme anglaise, just melt some vanilla ice cream. Same thing. So, or what I'm going to do today, my personal favorite, whipped cream. So there we have it. Let's try a little. You know, I like that, how the crust, a little crisp, and then so nice and moist inside. It's buttery, chocolatey. If you have a chocolate craving, this is a cake to make. You know, try it. You can cover and store it for 4 to 5 days. You can even freeze it. So until next time, I'm Stephanie Jaworski of joybaking.com.